Think you know?
How about that?
Think again.
That is stunning tennis.
The Australian Open starts January 20th on ESPN. Sometimes
Leanne Grayson?
things aren't quite as they seem.
Do you know who you welcomed into your home?
Servant, streaming now on Apple TV. A mother's love is forever growing.
Now I hate you.
Well, most of the time. Another episode of Mom, next on Paramount Network. He's desperate, armed,
Shots fired, officer down!
and has nothing to lose.
Release the hostage and you get to see them all.
SWAT, Wednesday on CBS. Phil Ken Seven is dead. And he's named Bird Girl as the next CEO of 7 and 7. But she's not going it alone.
Slam!
She's got a team.
The Bird Team!
Because for Bird Girl,
Bird Team, yeah!
the only thing more dangerous than everyday life is corporate life. Watch the series premiere of Bird Girl, Sunday, April 4th at midnight. On Adult Swim.
What's good, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Take Time Out with Tre Mosley. I am your host, Tre Mosley, and right before we started recording, I was like, when's the last time I saw you? And we were sitting here putting our heads together, and then we started saying, oh, this person was there, and this person was there, and this person was there, and then we came to an agreement that we need to see each other more. So my guess...
Yes, that's the hot take. Yeah.
That is the hot take.
Yeah.
When I last saw her, she was here in the great city of Las Vegas. But
Yes.
since then, lots of things have happened. She has moved from one state to another.
Yes.
We'll talk about that as well. One of the loveliest people out there, and
Mhm.
she has such a commanding voice.
Wow. Thank you. I think the same of your voice.
Oh, no, it's
Come on.
this show's about you today.
Okay.
I bring to you, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Kay Bess.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for
So-
having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for saying yes to the show.
Yeah.
So, as I often like to do, Madame, a lot of the folks in the business who may know you or have heard of you or have, seen and heard your work, we know the after. We know how things are with you in the VO world. But we like to talk about the before on here.
Okay.
Um, because sometimes there are little things that happen in the infantile steps of life
For
that
sure.
lead up to what we do. I talk about it often. Before I knew what voiceover even was, me and my
Yeah.
buddies would get our action figures and our tape recorders, and we would have like a radio play, and I didn't know that type of thing existed.
Yeah.
So I was already planting seeds in here
Yeah.
for it to now manifest itself in my work.
Yeah.
So let's take it back with you. You're currently in Tennessee,
Yes.
but
Yes.
you were not there the last time we spoke.
I had been in Tennessee for about 6 months. 8 months in
Well, I know you
2020.
say you still had boxes you hadn't opened.
Oh, yeah, because I moved. I moved inside of Tennessee,
Yeah.
right? So, like, I rented a place, right?
Mhm.
And then I bought a place. So,
Got you.
yeah. Yeah.
So prior to that, now correct me if I'm wrong, you're a Midwest girl?
No.
No.
I'm a Californian,
Oh,
born and
this
bred.
makes it even more interesting now.
Yes.
So for now we've learned a nugget. I don't know why I
Yeah.
thought you were Midwest.
It's my wholesomeness,
It
really.
could be. You and Tracy Lindley, who I just interviewed last week, you
Yeah.
two are like the most wholesome, just sweet people.
Well,
So that's
Tracy is wholesome and sweet. Mine is like a
oh,
mirage.
there's the other side of
Right.
things.
Yes.
We're not going to discuss that now. Shh. So, what was it like growing up in California?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was magical. Absolutely magical. I grew up in California in the 60s and 70s. And left there in '82 to move to Los Angeles. But I grew up in Goleta, California, which is just the sister city of Santa Barbara, about 100
Oh, okay.
miles north of Los Angeles.
Gotcha.
Absolutely idyllic, and I didn't even know it. I just thought, wow, as I look back on it, I go, oh, maybe I should never have left. Um, I grew up at the beach. My summers were spent at the beach, and it was it was everything that everyone imagines California to be. It was just a lovely, beautiful, sunny upbringing.
Mhm.
And in terms of the location, I mean, it was also the 60s and 70s, which had its own turmoil, but I was a kid, and so, um, you know, kids don't see things the same, they don't experience things the same, but it definitely had an influence on me for sure. But, um, you know, I I loved my I loved my upbringing, and I was very, very lucky to grow up in California. Um, and lived there again for, up until 3 years ago, and moved to Los Angeles in 1981, um, to go to acting school. So,
Ah, there
yeah.
we go. Yeah, my sister, uh, she was born in the tail end of the '60s. Well, in the mid '60s. She's born in '64.
Okay.
So, so she was able to experience a portion of the '60s. Um, grew up in the '70s. She graduated high school in the '80s.
Yeah.
So she's had that
Yeah.
nice little area where
Yes.
she's seen things progress and growing up in Miami, in Florida, in the South.
Yeah.
Things were a little different down there than California.
For sure.
Uh,
Yeah. Absolutely.
so she was able to experience a lot of things. What was it like, um, in your part of the world where you're seeing other things happen and it's like, why is that happening to a certain group of people? Like, what was the mindset in your hometown where you were? What was instilled in you?
Um, well, I am a preacher's kid.
Ah,
Um, my dad was an American Baptist preacher. Um, and so I grew up in the church, and I had a very, very positive experience growing up in the church. And my dad was, what I would say, um, he was a for lack of a better term, he was a progressive guy in the
mhm.
'60s and '70s, and he was very much a part of the civil rights movement as he could be,
Yeah.
and so, we had, um, y y y how do I say this? Like, he was very involved at UCSB in the
Okay.
campus ministry there,
Nice.
and, there were I don't know if you recall this or know of the history, but I'm not sure if it was I'm not this is where being a little kid is like, I can't remember what it was, or what instigated it. Was it the assassination of MLK Jr.? Was it the assassination of Bobby Kennedy at the time in the late '60s? But there were riots
At
in
Berkeley.
Isla Vista no, in Isla Vista, in
Oh, wow.
Goleta at UCSB, and it's sort of the famous burning down of the Bank of America.
I
Um,
recall that. Okay.
yeah, and so that was, that was all happening in my hometown, and, um, my dad was we had a lot of interesting people in our house, and, uh, and I just would characterize it as being, my dad was awake, and my dad was very, again, very, very civil rights minded, and so for me, it was, yeah, this is how life is. You are That's what you do in life. You support people who are marginalized, and you you take care of and you stand with, and so that was just very much a part of my upbringing,
Nice.
and we had foreign exchange students, we had foster kids in our house. We
Oh,
had,
wow. Okay.
um, you know, my dad was connected again with, it was early in affirmative action. And so my dad was connected to a couple of people at UCSB who were, you know, uh, welcomed into that program, and they became just lifelong friends. Um, and so again, it was, I don't know any other childhood. So to me, it just felt like, yeah, that's what this is. That's what it means to be uh, uh, the daughter of my father. That's what it means to be a Christian. That's what it means to be a Californian. It was sort of all of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was definitely for me a very happy um childhood.
Very
I
cool.
mean, all the I mean, my parents had a difficult marriage and they ended up getting divorced. I don't mean to sort of paint it as like the inner workings of my family was all idyllic, because it was so not. It was actually quite dysfunctional. But but in terms of what I the culture, and the surroundings, that I grew up in, and the
Sure.
the atmosphere, and how
What
I
you
how
took
I was
from it.
raised. Yeah, what I took from it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool.
So, yeah. But I
S
didn't even know, I mean, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything outside of my little bubble, outside of my little
Well,
you know?
sometimes, ignorance is bliss.
Well, and when you're a kid, I mean, I think
Sure.
that I think that parents do their best, you know, rightfully so, to protect you from things that can be frightening,
Yeah.
that can undermine your sense of safety in the world. And so, um,
They have to shield you from
yeah,
what's going on out there, so
yeah, and then, as time passes, you learn more, and more is revealed to you, about what what transpired in the years that you were growing up. And it's
yeah.
like, wow, when I think about the '60s, when I think about JFK, and I think about MLK Jr. and Bobby, Kennedy, and, like, that all of that happened from for me between my birth and age 7.
Wow.
So there wasn't any, it's not like, I remember my mother, um, I remember watching, the news a few years, because they would review it every year in the news. I remember watching with her, a review of JFK's assassination,
Mhm.
and I just remember being, in our den, you know, and sitting on the floor with her with little black and white TV. It was just like this big. So we're on the floor and we're kind of up close, and she just sat there crying, and I was like, you know, I must have been 4, and trying to understand, like, what my mom is so sad. This
Yeah.
is what is this, and so again, as years progress, you understand, and then you can place it in history, in your own history and in world history, and so,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, that's, it's you know, it's very, as kids, we live through the lenses of our parents at
for
times,
sure. Yeah.
and, um and sometimes the view is not focused until we get a little older,
Yeah.
and we can turn that dial and say, "Oh, okay, I see why you felt the way you felt about that thing."
Yeah.
And not only do we start to experience focus, but it also, uh, in some cases can define us and shape us
For sure.
into the person that we are set on course to be,
Yeah.
writing the chapter of our own story.
Yes.
And speaking of, um, so the next chapter, you come to, you leave the very quiet to now we're in LA, baby. We're going to acting school. And
Yeah.
so you had designs on being movie star, stage
Oh,
person.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I had designs on, winning an Oscar by the time I was 30, for
All right.
sure.
All
Yeah.
right.
Oh, yeah. I had big dreams. Yeah, and, you may make your plans, but what is the proverb? But God has the last word.
Yeah, you want to hear God laugh? Tell him what you
You
plan.
get God la yeah, tell me your plans. So, yeah, at the time in Santa Barbara in the late '70s, when I was in high school, I went to a rival high school of, some very talented and successful actors.
Hmm.
And we all kinda joined up in, what was called, California Youth Theater, and it was quite was quite well known for doing really excellent productions, and so I went again, I didn't go to school with them, but they were a part of the theater scene in Santa Barbara,
Sure.
Eric Stoltz and
Wow.
Anthony Edwards.
Oh, wow.
And Anthony Tony and I dated for, like, a minute.
Cut it out. You
I
ain't
know, isn't that so
Goose?
funny? Yes, that's funny.
Wow. Ah,
When we were I think we were 18, 19, like, right in there and I can't remember exactly, it really was maybe for 6 months or something, but that, he was truly my first love,
oh, wow.
like, truly, and I hold him in that place, I don't think that he holds me in that place, but, but that's okay, but he was very, he was being in that theater scene was very influential to me, and
Yeah.
both Tony and Eric went to USC, and were in the theater program. I don't think either of them I know Tony didn't graduate from the program. I don't think that Eric did either. But and I mention them only because I sort of unbeknownst to them, it's not like we were all best friends, except for the fact that I had dated Tony, but,
Yeah.
like, I I followed them is what I did. I followed them to USC, right? It was kind of like I wanted to do what they were doing. I
Mhm.
wanted to be in the world that they were in, and so um but I started I applied a year later after Tony,
Mhm.
and was accepted. I auditioned. It was for a Bachelor of Fine Arts program, so it was run like a conservatory. They had a bachelor's degree in theater, which was like, but the BFA program with the emphasis in acting was an auditioned program, and I and
Gotcha.
I and I auditioned, and I got in, which is great because my SAT scores sucked, like, they were so bad.
Wow.
They were so bad. I'm not a test taker. I was in the height of my right-brained living, like, I
Uh,
couldn't, I
I
couldn't I
got you.
couldn't think left to right at all. I was like, "Well, what if part of this question is what if part of this answer is right, and there's a part on the" I never even finished it because 'cause I'm too busy contemplating each, you know, multiple choice, like, oh my god, it was ridiculous. So, anyway, I ended up at USC, and I was there for 2 years, and it was a great experience, and it was also a very, difficult experience, it
Mm.
was the early '80s. I smoked as we used to say back in the day, I smoked like a fish. I don't even know what that means,
You
but
were
I smoked
smoking
a I
smoking the reefers.
I smoked so many cigarettes, it was ridiculous. It's like all I did was smoke, and I started smoking in college, like, that it wasn't something I had done before, right?
Oh, okay.
And then, and there were just a lot of drugs, and it's like I was a mess, and I was very anxious. I was a very anxious person, a lot of anxiety.
Sure.
And in the on the third, I think it was the third day of my junior year there, I had what I did not understand at the time, but I understand now. I had just an enormous panic attack,
Mm.
and I couldn't like be in my skin. I just was like, something's
Yeah.
happening to me. I can't be in this room. I can't be with these people. It was August and it was 100 degrees and we're in a little room without air conditioning. And I just was like, I have to get off campus. And I did. I got off campus and I never went back.
Wow.
And so I spent a while really floundering, doing drugs, um, just a mess. And somewhere in there, I was looking through Dramalog magazine at the time. I don't think it exists anymore, but in fact, I know it doesn't. I think it was absorbed decades ago by Backstage.
I
But
was about to say maybe it's backstage then.
yeah, I think it got absorbed by it. But Dramalog was a publication where you could go and um, they put out acting calls in there. They put out classes that you could take, scene study and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. It was an actor trade magazine.
Gotcha.
And I saw this advertisement for a voiceover workshop, which nobody taught voiceover then. I mean, it wasn't a thing. It was an underground job. Nobody, it wasn't the thing that it is
Yeah.
today. And when I had been in Santa Barbara, I was a jingle singer as a teen in
Ah,
my mid to late teens, and every once in a while, when I would do those things, they would ask me to read that. "Can you read that little part in between the verses?" And I'm, "Yeah," and I when I saw that ad, I was like, "Voiceover? Huh, I think I know what that is. I think I might have done that," I think I
yeah.
might have. And I also thought, "I think I could do that, because there's no camera on me."
Mm.
I was very self-conscious. I didn't like the way I looked. I didn't think I was pretty enough or thin enough or, I wasn't I didn't perceive myself as any of the things that, you know, Hollywood wanted, you
Right.
know? And so I thought,
Mm.
"Well, maybe I should go take that class and see what that's like." And I felt like I could do it, and it was one day, and so I did. I signed up, and there was a casting director who was it was at an on-camera, casting place,
Gotcha.
and they had, like, a reel-to-reel set up and just a microphone with a music stand, and they had hired a casting director. Her name was Donna Ross,
Mm.
and she was there, and she gave us copy, and she recorded us, and she called me the following Monday, and she was like, "I think you would be good at this, and I think you should take a real class." This is just kind of an introductory thing that we were doing, and
Yeah.
she said, "I think you should take a real one." And I said, Where? Like, with who? I don't even know,
Where do
what
I
this
go
is."
to find these people?
Yeah, and she pointed me to Tom Pinto.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
My guy.
yeah. So
Wow.
that was like 1980 84, 83, 84 in there. And
Wow.
I took a commercial class with Tom Pinto, and he was as sweet then as he is now,
Oh, I'm sure.
and makes me a little verklempt when I think about how many years, I've known him and the and the, you know, everything that sprang from meeting him, and working with him, and he was so affirming, of what I could do,
Yeah.
and he pointed me toward, these sort of fantastic, female prototypes of the time, Diane Pershing and Lynette Metty and
Mm.
these amazing women who had this fantastic authority in their voices, and I was like, "Oh,
Right.
I just wanna be like them," And so I took a class, and after that one class, it was like a 4-week class, he said, "I think you should just make a demo. I think you should," you know? I was like, "Okay. Can you help me? Like, how do I do that?"
Right.
So he helped me make a demo, and I said, "What do I do with it now?" And he said, "Well, why don't you send it to some agencies?" And so I sent it to 3. I sent it to the top 3 agencies in Los Angeles, right? Like ICM, uh, probably Sutton Barth and Benari,
SBV.
and William Morris, which actually wasn't a top agency in voiceover except for their celebrity department.
Right.
But they were such a big name,
Mhm.
the William Morris agency,
Go big or go home. I hear you.
And so I got a call from William Morris, and they
Whoa.
were like, We'd love to meet with you." And so I went in and I had a meeting with Nina Niesenholtz, who was developing the scale department at William
Mm.
Morris. And she was like, "Think you're great. Love to sign you." I said, "I'm not union." She goes, "You will be soon."
Ah,
Like, so inside of a month, I booked my first radio spot
incredible.
for Mitsubishi, which at the time was a brand new car company, brand
Mm.
new. So the commercial was all about, how do you pronounce that? Mitsubishi, like, um, and we're off to the races. I was with William Morris for 6 months before I moved to Sandy Schnarr Talent, which was a fledgling boutique agency that was just a small agency, and they were hungry, you know? And I found out later that Sandy had been, I think, an assistant, had worked her way up, to kind of being an assistant agent, associate agent at SBV Talent,
That
at
is
Sutton Barth
correct.
and Venari.
Yep.
And so but I didn't even know that. I just sort of heard like, "Oh, yeah, um, check them out." They're a really good agency, good people. They're young, and there was a guy at another talent that I worked with on that radio spot. His name was Fred Saxon. He passed away just a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow.
Um, uh, which, like, I was kind of looking for him to say like, "Hey," you know, and I had found out that he passed, but he said to me about 6 months in, at William Morris, he's the one who said to me, "You should find a better agent." Like he just was like, "You should be somewhere where you're really gonna grow," and I was
Mhm.
like, "Really?" I mean, I was incredulous the whole way,
Sure.
everything that was sort of happening, and so I was with Sandy for 12 years, and, uh, and I worked, I did well, I kind of was making a name for myself in the boutique agency realm, you know? And then she sent me on a job. You can cut me off anytime because I can talk forever, but
No,
she
no,
sent
it's
me on a
good.
job. She called me and she said, "Hey, are you available? I have a job for you." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Okay, I need you to get to NBC." And I said, "Okay." And, she, gave me the address, and I said, "What's it for?" And she said, "It's a promo." And I said, "What's a promo?" And, she goes, "Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Just go.
Just go. Just get there.
Just go. Just
They
go.
got
You'll
you.
Yeah, you're fine." So I was like, "Okay." So I went and I walked into at NBC. It's at the time anyway, they had recording studios that were they felt a little bit like they were in the basement. I don't know if that's right, but that's what it felt like. I felt like, they weren't schmancy studios.
Yeah.
It's like we sat at this half circle, kinda desk thing, and they had these microphones, like, placed, and then they had a screen, in front of us and stuff, and so I walked in. I was like, "Hey, I'm Kay, nice to meet you," and they're like, Great, have a seat, here's your
Mhm.
mic," and they were like, "Here's the guy you're gonna be reading with, Kay Bess, Don LaFontaine."
Cut.
Like, isn't it crazy? I know, it's ridiculous.
Time out.
Yeah.
we're going to pause for a second. We're going to pause for a second. And we're going to rewind this tape.
Okay.
So here's a young lady who hails from a small town in California,
Yeah.
which is, cousin to Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Goes to USC because she wants to be someone of reputation,
Yes.
of good repute.
Yeah.
Goes to school with Goose and
Goose had left. Goose had left USC by that time. I was on my own. Like
she was Goose
he was not,
adjacent.
he was doing like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and
Oh, wow.
and like
With
Revenge
Eric.
of the Nerds, Yeah, exactly.
Who would have been Marty McFly, but that's
I know. That's a whole story, right?
Leaves school, goes on a binge, is trying to find herself, finds an ad and says, "Hey, voiceover thing, I think I like it." Fast forward, and you walk in the studio, and Don.
I know. It's so funny.
We can just end the interview.
I know.
Here.
Thank you so much for
Like,
having
all
me.
right, well, that's it. As you can see, she's a great person. She made it, and bye.
Oh my goodness.
So,
Well, it's funny, because Don was certainly, he was certainly known in the realm of promo, but I don't think at that time that Don LaFontaine was Don LaFontaine. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
he like grew into this remarkable presence in probably within the next 5 to 6 years, after that. But
was
but
that
people who
coming
did promo, like they all knew. I mean, he was on NBC. He was everywhere. He may have gotten his first limo by then, but I'm not confident of that. But but yeah, I know it was crazy to me, and I didn't.
NBC at the time, they had some of the preeminent voices. Danny Dark
Yes.
was there.
Yeah.
Don.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because I remember growing up as a kid. I used to watch a lot of NBC because their Saturday morning cartoons, in my opinion, were the best.
Yeah.
From Smurfs to, but that's my point is, when I became cognizant of the business
Yeah.
and was in the business, and I would go back and watch old cartoons or listen to old promos, and I'm
Mhm.
like, so wait, he was the voice of, but he also did the promo for,
Yeah.
and it's like it's like having a puzzle. And for years, you had this one big block of missing pieces, and you're
Yeah.
like, I know something goes here. And then over the course of your VO career, you start to hear things and experience things and hear people's stories, and they're filling in those pieces for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Crazy, right? I
it
mean,
is absolutely crazy. Um,
that, Townsend Coleman, followed Danny Dark, right? He came in after that, and
mhm.
and then you're like, and he was this, you know, quite prominent on-camera commercial guy, and he was also starting to do a lot of animation, and it was like, wow, like what an outrageously prolific career. But yeah, and NBC, yeah, it was a time. And I didn't well, what's funny, here's the interesting thing about being a female in this business, that there weren't a lot of there weren't a lot of women who did promo.
Yeah.
Um, and um, so when I did that promo, and
Mhm.
I just did it, I might have gone in a second time. It was for a show called Life Stories, which was not Steven Spielberg's Amazing
Not
Story. It was
amazing story.
Life Stories, yeah, yeah. So, um, it it I did a few of them, but after I did that, just the promos for that show, for that release of that show,
Mhm.
um, I became known as a woman in promo. The
Wow.
and it carried me, in a certain way, right? So that a few years later, when I left Sandy Schnarr, um, I had a little bit of cachet,
Oh, yeah,
and
that's a big deal because
yeah,
there
even
weren't
though
a lot of women doing
yeah,
promo then.
yeah, and I didn't I really didn't do a lot of promo with Sandy at all, but once I moved to SBV, it was like, oh, then I stepped into the world of promo, and then I was doing launches for, Dr. Phil and for the Jane Pauley show, and I worked at CBS across the street from SBV, and I did a lot of their daytime, promos and stuff like that. So that again, that one little event kind of, set the table,
Yeah.
um, and so, yeah, it was kind of a wild experience, but, and then being at SBV was really where I feel like I just blossomed as a voice actor, and I got to do a lot of different things, and they really believed in me, and, I again, I'm just forever grateful. I mean, I'm grateful to everybody, that
Sure.
grateful to Sandy for those 12 years, and and SBV for taking me on and really developing me, and, it was really hard to leave them, and I did leave them ultimately to go to Atlas, but careers change and shift, and, and you get scared. I'll tell you, I got scared at a certain point in my career where things kinda started to fall off, and I was really naive, at the time, and I thought,
Yeah.
well, the only way that you can save a career that's falling off is to leave your agency and go to another agency, and that's not true. That's not true, and it's a part of why I coach the way that I coach and all that. Like, I did not communicate with my agents at SBV.
Mhm.
I just was, like, scared, my work dropped off, I gotta go, I ran, and so that was, that was an interesting thing, and they had asked me, when I first signed with them, like, do you do animation and v anything like that?" And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 I don't do that. I'm that's not my thing." And one of the beautiful things about being at Atlas was, some several years later, again, when my career shifted, and I was like, "Uh-oh, I either have to figure out how to stay in this business, or I have to find another way to make a living."
Yeah.
Um, I I thought, "You're an actor, Kay Bess, that's what you came here to do, and so you need to expand what you do, and so you really should try to get yourself into video games and animation, like, take a big deep breath, little girl, and jump in," you know?
That's right.
And, so I asked Heather, at Atlas, like, "Will you send me that copy?" And she was like, "Absolutely." And so, there was sort of a rebirth of my career in those arenas, as I continued to try to,
Sure.
and still do, work in commercial and promo and stuff like that,
Talk
but
about that, and a little bit more extensively. I think sometimes, when we get into this business, many people, whereas for you it was oh, I think I can do this thing, but you have some folks literally waking up like, this is what I want to do. I heard this thing, I want to do it. I saw this thing and want to do it. Um, Talk about the difficulties of making pivots within this industry, because you could be known for 3, 4, 5, 10 years as, hey, that's Kay who did, commercials. And then now all of a sudden it's like, oh, she's doing promos now. And then, you wind the clock a little more. What, she's in games? Like, talk to those folks who, let's say, they come into the business with the mindset of, I'm going to come in and all I'm going to do is video games and animation, and maybe it does not work out that way. How important is it to kind of have a, not necessarily a grasp, but you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket? Talk about the importance of learning different genres, because if something starts to cool off, the next
yes.
wave comes in, might heat up, and if you don't catch that wave, it's like you're still here.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, fundamentally, I am an actor, and so I came at it from that point of view, and, um and so in a certain sense, doing commercials to me felt very easy, very easy. I didn't have to develop a character. I didn't have to, the sound that I had, that I still have, but it grows and it changes and all of that. But the sort of marker of what I brought and why I think I was successful and when I was because I was just myself. I had no preconceived notions of what a voice actor ought to sound like,
Right.
and so when somebody gave me a piece of copy, I could read. Like, I could read, and so I was like, I would just read it, and so I wasn't putting anything on. And it was the time when there was, like, this it was the initial time, I wanna say, um, when advertisers were backing away from a really sort of a hyped up read about, like a animated, and I don't mean, character read, but just
Yeah.
like, "We're happy about everything we sell," that they were backing off of that, and in came, the Perrier read with Hal Riney, who I think changed the face of commercials, and I think it was in the '80s where it was like, "In a town, called Vergès in the south of France."
Mhm.
It was just like this,
And then the
Perrier.
slow motion bottle, Perrier.
Yeah, and it was just, like, understated, and I remember everybody in commercials was like, "What the snap is that read? Like, that's not a commercial." But it absolutely pivoted the way that we read commercials, and so I felt like I inadvertently hopped on that little coattail because I just had an understated read, and I wasn't trying to sell anybody anything, you know? And so in the beginning with with, uh with commercials and also with promo, right?
Mhm.
My promo read was super subdued. It wasn't high energy stuff. It was really low key. And so it was different sounding, I think, than
Yeah.
than a lot of promos at the time. Um, I am getting to the answer of your question,
No, you this is
but,
perfect.
like, what happened in 2012, so 12 years ago, was commercial work for me started to fall off, promo work started to fall off, and I and again, it was the answer to that question of, like, what are you gonna do?
Mhm.
And remembering that I came in as an actor, and so I went back to acting school is what I did. I went to a 2-year Meisner technique program in Santa Monica, like, great, great program, and, um, and then I auditioned my ass off, I just, um but I think for me, I realized that I am an actor, and an actor must reinvent.
Yes.
We must. Even even Oscar winners reinvent, even because popularity, or if you're the flavor of the week, well, guess what? Somebody else is gonna be the flavor of the week next week.
You got it.
And so what am I gonna do while that's happening? Do I have an expectation that my flavor of the week is gonna go on forever? No, I can't. And that's where I think voice actors, I'll just speak to our own industry. That's where I think voice actors get, stubborn and bitter, and then they fall off the map. It's like, I I'm cognizant of the fact that even though my voice is my voice and I don't change my voice, but I have to be aware of the trends. I have to be aware of what is happening in in commercials, in promo, in animation, in
Yeah.
video games. I have to be aware, and then I have to ask myself, how do I fit in that? How can I be, authentic to myself and adapt,
Mhm.
to what is going on, um, and I think, most of the people that I started in voiceover don't do voiceover anymore. They
Mm.
haven't done it for 20 years because they stopped. You know, I had a friend, and we were talking about demos, and it was like, and she was like, oh, you made a new demo, right? And when I first made a demo, it was on reel to reel, right? And then it was like, well, then I update my demo and then I put it on cassette, right? Because that became the
That was a
medium,
new
right?
medium. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was like, uh, CD,
CDs.
right? So then you move to CD, right? And all along the way with my friend, and then it moved to MP3s, you
Yeah.
know, and then it moved to you gotta have a website with your, with all the stuff, right? And
Yeah.
every single step of the way, my friend was like, "No, I'm not gonna do that." If they want me, they can contact my
Oh,
agent.
they wouldn't keep up.
You don't keep up, right? You don't keep up, and there are a lot of ways in which people don't keep up. That's one of them. If you're not willing to be where people look for voices, well, then they're not gonna find you, you know?
That's right.
And then if you look and say I think this happens a lot with women. I coach more women than I do men, but there's this thing of we think because our voice sits in a particular space, it's higher or lower or or mid-range or whatever
Yeah.
it's like someone might say if your voice is higher, oh, you have a young voice, you have a youthful read, right? Um, but we're each in our generation, so you might have a young voice, but you were born in 1958. And so when you're 60 and you have a young voice, you can't necessarily do a young voice of a modern era because we
Yeah.
have different cadence and we speak differently and we use
Mhm.
different language and we, you know, just we upspeak or this particular speak or what have you, right? And then they're wondering like, why I have a really young sounding voice. How come I'm not booking the young things that I used to book? And it's like, because you're 60 and you
Right.
don't sound, you may have a young voice, but you've lived. And so you have wisdom in your voice and you can't hide it. It doesn't matter, you
Yeah.
know, it doesn't matter that it's in a higher register, you know. So so there's an awareness, of who you are and what your voice sounds like. And
Mhm.
again, how do I fit into my age group, my generation,
Mhm.
the culture in which I grew up in versus the culture that I live in now. You're constantly adapting, and if you think, well, I booked that 10 years ago, it's like, yeah, doesn't matter because everything's different now.
Yeah.
It just is, so I think with people coming in and kind of saying, "Well, I just do commercials." It's like, well, if you're just gonna do commercials, then you really gotta be on your game and keep track of how things change, and you gotta move with it, you
Yeah.
know? And that requires an extraordinary amount of attention, So, I think moving around moving from one thing to another, sometimes you're hot in, commercially, and then it falls off, and then all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're working in games, and it's like, well, great, and that's the way it for me, it works,
Yeah.
I'll 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 have a run, on commercials, and I'll be like, "Oh, my kingdom for a juicy role in a video game," right?
Yeah.
And then I'll do a video game and be working on it for a year and be like, "Oh, I just wish I could have a simple 15-minute session for a commercial," it's like grass is always greener, but you again, it just makes it possible for you to your odds of sustaining a career if you've diversified are just much greater, much greater.
Absolutely.
So
I remember, and I just told this story, last week, when I first got into the business in 2009, um, my focal point, was video games and animation.
ah.
Um, Again, if you wanna hear God laugh, tell him what your plans are. My first breakthrough VO because, when I got into it, the dawn of the pay to plays were here.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was on Voice 123 and a couple of other places.
Yeah.
So I didn't know the value. So I would book something for like $150, and I was like, "Ha! You stiffs work it all day, and I just did this in 10 minutes." And I just thought I was
For
on
sure.
top of the world.
Yeah.
But then you start to be around folks who've been doing this 5, 10, 20 plus years, and he's like, "Oh, you made $150 off that commercial? I'd have gotten 1,000." I'm sorry?
Yeah.
You would have how
What?
would you yeah. What do you mean? So,
Yeah. It is a process, right? It's a
it
learning
is.
curve for sure.
And
Yeah.
what's funny is I didn't get my first video game until 2019. So a
Okay.
decade in, I got my first video game.
Right
Um,
on.
I started to make a name for myself in an area that as a kid, I think it's something that was innate in me. When I was a kid, uh, in kindergarten, I was reading on a fifth grade level. So books always fascinated me. Reading
Yeah.
stories always fascinated me. So I guess it's no surprise that even though I wanted to do video games and animation, I started making a name for myself in narration.
Yeah.
Corporate narration. Um, there's this small network called Daystar. They're like a Christian network.
Yeah. 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 I'm familiar with this stuff.
And I did a short 2-minute piece. Ironically, since we were talking about MLK earlier, it was about MLK um, and how he came from a family of orators and great speakers.
Yes.
And they're like, we want to read that has reverence.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, where do I pull that from? And what I did was I started thinking about all the great narrators that I listened to growing up. And
Yeah.
the first one that popped in my head, I said, "How would Keith David read this?"
Mm.
And I didn't want to exactly mimic him,
Right.
but I remember just sitting there. I'm like, okay, I could see him, probably sitting up with his chest out, and he just has this his grin. And that's part of his voice. When he speaks, he always has it all comes through the teeth when
Yeah.
he speaks. It's, so and so and so, and it comes through here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, I need to somehow embody that in me. And the first line uh, in the script, it says, "What does it mean to be a king?" I'm like, now, and of course, it's a play on words because of
Sure.
the family's name.
Yeah.
So I just let it rip. What does it mean to be a king? And I just go with it.
Yeah.
And they lifted the first take.
Amazing.
And I was like,
Yeah. I was going to say, you, y- y- you possess that already. Like you know, it's nothing you had to search too far
yeah.
for. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just present in your voice. It just is. It just is.
And for me, and thank you for that. When it went to finish, and I did not have Daystar. I had cable, but I'm like, which provider has this channel? Because I wanted to see it. And they were like, "Well, we can send you a copy." That's another thing I didn't know, that
Right. Get
you
copies.
know I'm like, you'll send me a
Wow. Yeah.
okay. And then they sent it. They like, "Well, you just can't share it yet until it airs." I'm like, ain't nobody seeing this. So it aired on TV because I told my mom to see if she could find it. And they sent me the copy. And I'm just sitting there like, wow. I'm, because of the things I was doing on the pay to play sites was nobody was going to hear that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but here's something, even though it's not an ABC, CBS, NBC, but for those 20,000 folk that are watching Daystar, I'm like, there are people hearing
Yeah.
my voice in the world
In the
right now.
world. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe this narration thing is not so bad. So the narrations started to come, but I was doing more so corporate narration.
Mhm.
Um, and then that kind of migrated into e-learning. That was like my bread and butter my first few
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. That's
Excuse
good,
me.
really good bread and butter.
Oh, you better believe it, sister. But I had not yet still had any animation, still no video games, and I had a fascination with promo. Um, and that really came from what I now know as affiliate work.
Yes.
When you watching the news and it's, the 6 o'clock news with so and so and so, and I'm like, who's that guy that's doing that voice? But
Yeah.
then you turn on channel 4 and it's a whole nother guy live from Miami. I'm like, well, who's he? So you're starting to hear these different voices, and how it all came to a head for me back in the 80s, as a child growing up in the 80s. I was, what, 8 years old in 83, watching a little TV show called Solid Gold.
Solid gold. Love
And
solid gold. Yeah.
it was one of the first shows that I heard, other than the Top 40 show, that the announcer would say his name at the end.
Yeah.
On America's Top 40, it was Charlie Tuna. Um, at the end of Solid Gold, he's like, for Solid Gold, this is Robert W. Morgan. I'm like, what a prestigious name. Like, the W, like, how, all right. Like, I like that. And I always remember that when I got into it, I'm like, I want to do that, like
Yeah.
announce.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's where my love for promo came in.
Yeah.
And I started to research it more. And I'm like, who's the voice of such and such? My local TV stations are like, well, that's Charles Van Dyke. I'm like, oh, okay. But I also heard him on. So now I'm just researching. Charlie Van Dyke has been the, station voice
Yeah.
for it. And like, oh, so you can do a whole bunch of stuff. And all of this stuff is starting to now, I'm just absorbing it, soaking
Yeah.
it all up. Um, and that's when I started to say, well, maybe this promo thing is something. But I couldn't get any of the major agencies to even sniff my way, because a lot of the work that I was getting, I did not have a professionally made demo.
Yeah.
But
Which, let's just stop right there for a second. So you're getting you were working, getting a lot of work, and you still didn't have a professionally made demo. This is like a thing that I always tell my clients, like, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, you know?
absolutely,
Like, you don't start with a professionally made demo. Right? It's like an extraordinary cost, blah, blah, blah. But so
amen.
you can make a lot of progress without, you know.
Yeah. Dan Leonard used to always say, you know, don't spend money to get the gear to get the gig. He's like, if you get enough gigs, you'll get the money to get the gear.
Yeah, it's good. Yes.
I
Smart
n-
guy.
I
Yeah.
never forgot that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't coach as much as I used to, but I would tell my students, man, how much is your microphone? I'm like, Don't worry about that
Don't
right
worry about that, Mike. Yeah.
There's a mic on Amazon for about a tenth of the cost
Yeah.
that will do you well until
Yeah.
you're ready to pay for this. Because if I tell you how much it is, you're gonna fall on the floor.
Yeah.
What, like $300? I'm like, go higher.
Yeah.
And then they hear it and it's like sticker shock. You paid $1,000? I'm like, you know
Yeah.
why? Because I can afford it, because I made enough money to do
Yeah.
so.
And
But
that's even like a kind of a mid-range price there. And then there are
right.
mics that are so much
Because
more,
there's a U87 floating around somewhere
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's a mortgage payment for some people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I never forgot that. But it's always interesting for me when I talk to people, especially in our business, how they may have had maybe a certain destination where they wanted to land,
Yeah.
but they didn't quite land there until these other things happened. Because I had gotten to a point where I'm like, well, guess I'm gonna never do any video games. And then all of a sudden in 2019, I auditioned for Madden and ended up being with them for 5 years.
Yeah,
So
that's fantastic. Yeah.
it's like, all right, this was worth it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's kinda
now,
like I think, like, what I'm hearing from you, right now is that you were curious. And, what's the commercial? It's like, "Stay thirsty, my friends," like
You know.
you have to maintain your curiosity about what's out there, and I mean, for me, it was, you hear an affiliate or American Top 40 and you go, "Who's that? Like, what's that? What are they
Yeah,
saying there? I wanna
yeah.
say that. I wanna say those words." That's what it was for me, and I remember like, I watched PBS, and it was like,
Oh, yeah.
"This program is brought to you by
A
the
grant
blah,
from
blah
the
a grant from the blah, blah,
yeah,
blah
from
foundation," and I was
Chubb.
like,
Oh,
"I
yeah.
wanna do that. I wanna
Yes.
be that person," and sure enough, when it one of the one day, I had worked on this PBS show called Living and Working in Space,
Wow.
and it was cool, and it was kind of like, I swear to God, I think it was like one of the first sort of, um, computer voices that I did, and it was in the '80s. It was in the late '80s, early '90s, I think,
Wow.
where I was the voice of something on this ship in space where people were working and living,
Oh, wow.
and so it was an automated voice, and, it was just so funny, but I remember being on that session and then saying, like, t talking to the producer and saying, "I'm so happy to be on this PBS show, and I really have I'd really I would I would just so love to read the thing at the end about, a grant from blah, blah," and she goes and she was like, "Oh, do you wanna do that?" And I was like, Can I?"
Can I?
Like, I did, and then it was like because it was PBS, it was like this, it was still union, but it was like a PSA rate,
Yeah.
so it was like $200, and
Mhm.
here I had this thought of, that PBS, so prestigious and everything that it was gonna be a money-making thing, and I was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
Not so much. It was a labor of love, and it was
It
fun,
really
and I think it's the only time I ever did it, but just to speak to that sense of, like, what do you wanna do? You say it and you follow it, and you kind of I mean, it's a testament to putting it out in the world,
yeah.
you know?
I had my PBS moment too, and not only
Yeah.
did I have my PBS moment, it was for my hometown PBS station.
Oh, that's dreamy. That's
Ah,
fantastic.
and I'm like, "The following is brought to you by a grant from, Harvey and Marjorie Koresh," or something like I still remember it,
Yeah.
and because I remember going home for the holidays, and I've never watched so much PBS in my life. I'm like, "I'm gonna hear this spot
I'm
coming,"
gonna hear it.
and it was like 11:30 at night, and I'm like, "It's not gonna happen," and then I heard WPBT channel 2. I'm like,
Yeah, there I am. Yeah,
and that was it for me.
so exciting. Yeah,
So yeah,
it's
that
great.
was definitely a full, circle moment.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
as we begin to wrap,
Yeah.
um, I want you and I know that you are, a heavy proponent in regards to empowering other women in voiceover. So I ask you, Kay Bess,
Yes.
there is a young lady right now that's watching this, and she's hearing your story, and perhaps she has some doubts about her own journey, or she says, "You know what? I think this is something I want to do. I know that strides have been made over the decades, but we still have a ways away to go." What do you say to her that lets her know that if it's something you want to do, like how do you instill that into her to keep her going?
Oh my goodness, the business today is so different than when I started, and at the same time, you know, it's an age-old story, that you you pursue that which you love, and you train, and you make yourself available, and you constantly seek to get better.
Mhm.
I think that's that's at the heart of it, that's kind of at the heart of it.
Yeah.
Um, I would also say this, and I think that this is what marks I'm aware this is what marks my career and why. I think I've had the career that I've had. And I think it's because I walked through the open doors.
Mm,
And everything about the the rest of my career, when I was seeking to be an on-camera actor and seeking to be a recording artist, and I had a demo deal with CBS Records and when I was 19, and that just fell apart, and it was
wow.
awful, and it was, it was fuel for my drug-addled, early 1980s. Um, that was a closed door, and my pursuit of all things on camera, those doors were not opening. They for whatever reason, it may be that I closed them,
Mhm.
it like, what was I willing to do? There were certain things I was unwilling to do.
Yeah,
I was unwilling to take my clothes off, you know, and that is a closed door,
absolutely.
particularly in the '80s. I think
Yeah,
that's still the case now, but
the casting
in the
couches and
'80s,
stuff.
there were yeah, it was like that was an expectation, Um, and so with voiceover to me was just a series of open doors that I just kept walking through, and there's something about that. What is the world telling you? What is, y y you know, however you wanna couch that, whether it's what's the universe telling you, what's the world telling you, what's God telling you, what is it, just a sense of your place and, like, where are you free to move, And so I just like we have said twice now, you may make your plans, and God laughs. Um, you gotta listen to that too,
Yeah.
right? That sometimes we may have I didn't have a plan to be a voice actor. That was not my plan, right? So somebody coming in now can look at my career and go, "Oh, look at you with this career, and you look what you did." And it's like, "Yeah, but it wasn't my plan."
Mhm.
And so in a certain degree, somebody with a less positive outlook could go, "Yeah, I failed," right? Right? I didn't do film. I didn't I never made a movie. I was never a series regular on a TV show. I
Yeah,
never did that. And you could go, "Oh, wow. Too bad for her. What a gosh, she had so much potential,"
right.
But instead, it was like, "Well, I'll walk through the open doors." And and along the way, I built something, you
Yeah.
know? And so that's a lot of yammering for advice for somebody coming in, but it's perspective, right? It's like, you may very well have a plan to be a voice actor, and you may end up being a casting director. You may
Mhm.
end up being a copywriter. You may end up being an engineer. You may end up, like, there are so many things inside of the realm of voiceover that are critical to the production of the things that we make, that we collectively make, we
Yeah.
all it's a collaborative effort for sure, all the little things that we do, and
Mhm.
so you just don't know, so, right? Keep your eyes and your ears open and be willing to pivot. 'Cause I think it was my life, my career. It was like, I just was willing to pivot, So, again, it wasn't my dream, wasn't my plan, but it turned into a beautiful career, and a good life. So
I'd say. I'd say. Speaking of, and we never touched on it. Why
Yep.
Tennessee?
Why Tennessee? Well, my ex-husband and I, who are close, he was transferred here to
Okay.
Nashville, and our daughter was still in high school, and I was homeschooling her, and it was
Gotcha.
during COVID, and he was like, "I have to take this job," I think I need to, and so the cost of living is less here, although, it's rising, but it's nowhere near California. It's just,
Absolutely not.
like, and so I just thought, well, I don't want for our daughter's parents to be in 2 different states, I don't that's not good, and we should try our best to be, a unit, a family, as long as we're able to do that,
Yeah.
and it was during COVID, and I had been working on Star Trek Picard, and they in the 2nd season, they moved to recording from home. In the
Yeah.
1st season, I had to show up in
Oh,
studio, and so I was like, "I'm never leaving, until this job is done because I'm not giving it up," you know? Um, and so when they moved, during the 2nd season to, recording from home, I was like, "I can go. I can move," you know? And everything else had been moved to recording from home because of COVID, so I kept working in games, I cultivated a dubbing career while in Nashville,
nice.
from producers that I was working with in LA who still wanted to, who were willing to do that, and so and of course, affiliate work and promo work is really all from home, and
Yeah.
so I was able to work, and so I thought, "Well, let's all go," and so we shared a truck, and we packed everything up, and we moved, and we dropped my stuff off at the place I rented and then took his stuff to the place he rented 5 miles down the road, and that's sort of how it happened, and then and I was able to buy something here and, which is great because I never ever would have been able to have afforded something in
Oh,
California,
yeah.
and even when you make a decent living, I mean, I was never a ginormous, earner. I had my really great years, and I have been very, very consistent in my earnings, and so it's been a good living, I am kind of a journeyman actor. I've just have been, maintaining, a level of work which has sustained me, and so that was a huge piece of it, like, I can afford to buy something here, and I really knew because I am getting older and, and I am aware that there are seasons to this work, and, there will come a time when, I whether by choice or by attrition, I retire, and so I wanted to set a mortgage in place that where I could with my retirement, I could afford to live and be steady, So that was why that was really the case. And it is also Nashville is, um, you know, the music business here is it's just
Oh, I
extraordinary,
know.
as you
I love
know, right?
Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was really important to me. That was really important. I wanted a place where there was just an excellent sense of the arts and music and, food and culture and, and diversity, like, I wanted to be in a place that felt lively, like Los Angeles is lively,
Yeah.
and so it had those things on a bit smaller scale, and so it just felt like, yeah, I can do that.
Well, they
I
call it the Music City.
It is
So,
the music city.
all right. My favorite question, and
Yeah.
it's how we end the show.
Okay.
How does Kay Bess take time out for herself?
Oh. Oh my goodness. I'm getting better at this. Like I'm getting, I'm cultivating it for sure. So I have been on this I've been on this sort of health kick. I've been on this health journey, path, let's say, um, for the past 8 or 9 months, which has been great. And I've dropped about 25 pounds and changed the way that I
I
eat.
see
And
some I see the guns out.
eh, um, uh, And in the midst of that, it's really not like I mean, it's interesting because yes, it incorporates eating and exercise and blah blah blah, but it's really like this sort of shift of lifestyle, if you will. And so part of that shift has been um like saunas and cold plunging
Mm,
and like and long walks and like, those are the things that I do that, like, allow me to exhale, you know? It's, uh, it when I'm in a sauna, I'm by myself, and there are no distractions, I'm sort of alone with my thoughts, which
Mhm.
can be scary some days, like, I don't wanna be alone with my thoughts, like, you know, but I do find that just the quiet of it's definitely opportunity for meditation and prayer
Yeah.
and I just come out of there alive, I just and so those are the things. That's how I really take care of myself, and then I also surround myself with really good friends. I have really good friends who don't I have one or two that live here,
Mhm.
but mostly mostly my friends are in California and in Seattle, and they are I communicate with them all the time, and we use this fabulous app called Marco Polo, and we talk to each other, and we see each other's faces, and they are the best thing ever. I don't know what I would do without my friends. So,
That's cool. That
yeah.
is very cool. All right. I've held you captive long enough. Tell the
Oh,
folks
it's
where they
been
can
great.
find you on social media and all that good stuff if they wanna reach out to you and
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Kay Bess. I also have a coaching group called Trust and Be Brave, which is on
oh,
Facebook as well. If you're a voice actor, really the only requirement is that you are working in some fashion in it. Like, it's not really for people who are just curious, right? So and then you can find me on Instagram at Kay Bess. Those are the 2 places, and then my coaching website is trustandbebrave.com, and that's where you'll find, my blog and coaching opportunities, and sometimes I teach classes and stuff like that, and then kaybest.com is where you'll find my work. So,
so what she's saying is, y'all, she ain't hard to find.
I am not hard to find.
Well,
Yes.
this has been,
Seek and you will find.
hey, she's there. Look her up. This has been this has been absolutely, wonderful, and, I thank you so much for joining
Thank you,
me
Trey.
and the folks, today. Hope you kids learned something. Um, this is if this isn't it's not where you start, but how you finish story, I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, she's giving you ups and downs and in betweens. She dated Goose. I gotta go back to that. Um, that's just,
Just for a minute.
yeah.
Just for a minute. But it was very sweet and meaningful.
It
It's a
doesn't
love.
matter the time, it's the time spent. So that did it for me.
Yeah,
She is Kay Bess. I am Tre Mosley, and this is Take Time Out with Tre Mosley. And now go take some time out for yourself. And we're
indeed.
out of here. See ya.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to the Take Time Out with Tre Mosley podcast, part of the Titan Media Network. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. To see the video version of this, you can find us on YouTube on the Take Time Out with Tre Mosley YouTube page. Thanks for listening, or thanks for watching. Either way, we'll see you next time.